Hello, welcome to The Writing Engineer, and to the first in my new series called The Science in My Science Fiction. So the first topic that I'm going to be covering today is that my first book, Amara's Law, Blood Tech, has some lasers in it. So we're going to be covering the topic of lasers today. Now, most of you might know what lasers are, especially those ones that you can hold in your hands and point at things, little laser pointers that you can buy almost anywhere for $5 to $10. These are probably some of the more simple types of lasers that people have encountered on a daily basis. But lasers are everywhere. Lasers are in your printer. That's why they call them laser printers. Lasers are in your DVD player or your Blu-ray player. There's even lasers that can be used for types of television and medical procedures and basically everything else that we use in our lives. But how does a laser work? Now, you might not, at first glance, figure that this is something that you might need to know. But if you are a writer of science fiction, then you need to know how the science in your fiction works. So, lasers. The principle behind lasers is going to, on the surface, sound pretty straightforward. Pretty much all that a laser does is harness the physics effect which happens when electrons change from one electrical state to another electrical state. Now, this is kind of an oversimplification, but usually when you get an electron that moves from a higher energy state to a lower energy state in an atom, it will release energy. And if you're lucky, that energy will be in the form of what's called a photon. Now, a photon is let's call it the smallest measurable bit of light that exists. There's kind of whole quantum stuff that goes on with photons, and we're not really going to get into it here, but they're really kind of weird because they are both a particle and a wave at the same time, which is kind of cool if you think about it, but that's not really the topic of what we're going on here. So we're going to cover one of the simpler types of lasers, which is called a gas laser. And as it sounds like, the medium that causes your laser to work is a gas. And some of the simpler types of gas lasers are what's called helium-neon lasers, and they're filled with the noble gases helium and neon. The glass tube, which holds these two gases, is capped on either end with two mirrors. So what happens is you apply an electrical field to the gas inside this little tube, and it glows, usually an interesting orangey red type of color. And what will happen is that glowing gas, or plasma, is exciting and de-exciting. All the electrons in their little orbits around the atoms of helium and neon excite up to an energy level and then come back down. And when they do that, photons get emitted. And some of the photons, if you get a chance to look at a helium-neon laser tube without its black covering around the whole thing, you'll see that inside it's just going to glow. So some of those photons are coming from that into your eyes. But other photons are going back and forth like this between two mirrors. And when you get that is what causes a laser. So these photons are rattling back and forth between two mirrors on either end. And one of those mirrors happens to be a little bit, let's call it leaky. So it lets out some of the light. And when it does that, the light that it lets out comes out and forms the laser that you would see. Now, helium-neon lasers, the most typical type, are red lasers. They operate in the 630 nanometer range. I can get very specific if you guys actually want, but I think that that's not the point of this particular series. In fact, I actually have one. If you hold on just 1 second, I can show you. This is a helium-neon laser. This is the laser tube inside this plastic container here. This is here so that you don't inadvertently touch the high voltage red and black wires. when it's operating. So if you can see, actually I might take this apart so you can see it a little bit better. So this is not plugged in, so don't feel concerned that I'm going to hurt myself here. I know what I'm doing. I work with lasers every single day. So we take off these high voltage clips. We can take out what's called the laser tube. Now you see inside this tube there's a tiny little other glass tube. That's what contains the helium neon gas. So when you apply a voltage to either end of this, the high voltage, usually somewhere in the thousands of volts to get it started, you'll see a glow happen inside this little tiny tube here. And that is the electrons from the helium neon gas exciting and de-exciting. You can see here and here there's two little mirrors. So the laser will come out of, actually it will come out of both ends on this particular one. And because these mirrors are lined up so that they are perfectly aligned to one another, the light that comes out is what's called coherent light, or it's all light that is traveling in the same direction. They're all parallel to each other. Unlike a flashlight, where if you turn on a flashlight, what happens is the light comes out in a cone. I'm sure you've seen this if you've used a flashlight. The further away from a flashlight you get, the larger the beam. But with a laser, the further away from the laser you get, the laser beam stays kind of the same size within reason. And that's one of the cool things about lasers, is that they can shoot for really, really long distances and still be detectable. Now lasers can change their wavelength or their color depending on what you're using as your laser medium. In fact, laser, which is actually an acronym, stands for Light Amplification by Stimulated Emission of Radiation, LASER. So lasers of all types exist. There's ultraviolet ones, there's visible ones, which run the range from blue to yellow, orange, red, green, all kinds of colors. And then there's ones that go into the infrared range. Some of them go so far into the infrared range that they become the heat ray, or the ray of death, that you can use sometimes in your books to kind of burn or melt things. We have a couple of those where I work, and they are extremely powerful and very dangerous. Now, knowing this little bit of information about lasers may help you in writing a little bit better story if you happen to use lasers in your story. I use one in my story, and the person who was using it tells our main character that he was glad he didn't have to use it because it operated on some advanced laser type of terminology, which we're not going to bother with, but that it was set at a wavelength which would be absorbed by water in her body. And there was enough energy in the laser to actually evaporate all of the water in her body at the same time. Now, it's a heck of a lot of energy that would have to be put into a laser, but that's where the fiction part of science fiction comes in. Well, I suppose that's it for today. If you have any questions on lasers or my book, which is Amara's Law, Blood Tech, which is going to be coming out very soon. I am currently working with the designer on the cover. You can feel free to leave your questions or comments below. Future things in this series are going to include topics such as prosthetics, or anesthetics, or computers, including quantum computers or quantum technology. I have a lot of technology stuff in my books. I may even go so far as to include information about firearms and rail weapons in this series, because those are all technology that I use in my science fiction books. Anyway, if you've enjoyed today's content, please give me a thumbs up. If not, give me a thumbs down. Let me know that you weren't too impressed with what I gave you today. If you want to contact me, I'm going to leave all my contact information in the stuff below. And don't forget to subscribe on your way out. If you'd like to be notified immediately of when any of my videos come out, please click the little notification bell. That's all for today. Thank you very much, and have a good evening. because it won't make any sense anyway.